We are putting together a case to describe all of the amazing things that you all are doing for young people in the workforce space. Many of you shared your curriculum trainings with us, which we have been able to put together and do some analysis of, and we're going to hear the results of that shortly. We've been able to do some work with Brookings to identify career pathways that align with the core experience, and with the Urban Institute to make sure that the work that you all are doing with your young people is preparing them for high quality jobs. So I'm really excited. We started this project together back in the fall, and we've done a lot of work together with a great team. So I'd like to introduce them to you and have them share how they, what they have learned about your work and the possibilities of taking your work to the next level. And we're going to be making a case that then we can take to funders and employers and the rest of the world to make sure that they understand what an incredible resource cores are in terms of workforce development. So really excited to get an update on this project. And we've been talking for a while with the Casey Foundation about supporting this work. During the last 4 years, we talked a lot about the American Climate Corps and the role that that can play in developing a clean workforce for a clean and sustainable economy. And we've talked over the last couple of days about how the new administration is taking a different direction and that there's some challenges there. But we know that climate change is not going away. We know that natural disasters are still more frequent and more powerful. We know that communities still need to prepare for environmental changes, and we know that workers need to be prepared to do this work. So whether it's today, whether it is 4 years from now, the work that we do is relevant, and this is laying the groundwork for us to make the case. So regardless of a changing political environment, I'm still really excited about the potential for this work. So, the Annie Casey Foundation is one of the largest philanthropic foundations focusing on opportunity youth in the United States. In 2021, the Casey Foundation launched Thrive by 25, dedicating at least half of their investments over the next decade to improving the well-being and prospects for young adults between 14 and 24. And by working with young people, Casey seeks to ensure that they have the support they need, the relationships, the networks, communities, education, employment opportunities they need to successfully transition to adulthood. Not only a philanthropic foundation, the Casey Foundation advances research and solutions to overcome barriers to success, help communities demonstrate what works, and influence decision makers to invest in strategies based on solid evidence. So we're really thankful to have their support and partnership. Renita Jane is representing the Casey Foundation today, and I'm going to ask her to come up and talk a little bit about why they view this work as important and why they feel that investing in cores is important. Renita helps lead the Foundation's effort to equip young people with education, employment, and training needed to succeed in today's economy. Before coming to Casey, she worked as an associate director for research with the Aspen Institute's Economic Opportunities Program, where she collaborated with funders on strategy development, project implementation, practice improvement, and policy development. And so please join me in welcoming Renita from the Casey Foundation.
Thank you. Let's see. Hi, can you guys hear me? I'm not used to being behind a podium, so this is new for me. But thank you, Mary Ellen, for that introduction. I'm really just happy to be here today. I've been here all morning, and I've just really enjoyed connecting and just learning more about your work and what you guys are doing across communities in the U.S. It's just such critical work that's happening. And it's been inspiring to be in a room and to be in community with you all and to see what you're advancing to. So as Mary Ellen said, I work at the Casey Foundation, and she kind of gave us a nice overview of what it is, so I'm not going to go over that. But I thought I would give you some high-level perspectives around like what we do at Casey, specifically the portfolio that I work with. So my work specifically focuses on the employment, education, and training opportunities for young people who are at risk of or who have disconnected from work, school and work. So what we call is opportunity youth, right? And I think one thing to kind of call out that we are really careful to thinking about in our approach and our investments is that it's really informed by what young people are navigating and what they need to support for themselves for success in today's labor market. So what we see is that we know that more and more young people are really navigating much longer, more complex, and really nonlinear journeys between school and work. And that's really the reality that they're in, right? They've experienced interruptions to their education, struggling to get the credentials they need to get a living wage job, and really struggling to secure a solid foothold in today's labor market. So those are the realities that we know young people are facing, and we also know that they're making some decisions where school and work are at odds with one another, and we don't want that to be the case. So when you think about our portfolio and our funding, I would say it really focuses in two main areas. One is that our investments are really around supporting career pathway programs that really position young people to connect to jobs with family-sustaining wages, and then also with engaging with employers and industry partners to really identify and cultivate those employment opportunities, so not that only young people get a job, but they can grow and advance in their careers. So that sounds pretty simple, right? Like kind of straightforward, like workforce development 101. But I think we all recognize that's not really what it is. And I think as we do our work, we've learned a lot from practitioners such as you all and from young people around like what are some features that are really important to call out and pay attention to as you're thinking about these programs, right? And we learned about the importance of providing flexible learning experiences that are really tailored to young people's goals and to their family and their work responsibilities. So it's not going to be a straight up training program all the time, right? There's going to be on-the-job training or other aspects to it. We've also learned about environment, and that's really important, and to pay attention to an environment that really fosters a sense of belonging and inclusion for young people and how that cannot be discounted. I think we often say in the field that relationships are important, but I think we underestimate how important they are and how that connection and that importance of that relationship to caring adults is really critical for young people. I think these caring adults, we've learned, not only provide guidance, but they empower young people to get their own self-efficacy and think about how they're going to be progressing along a career path. And then finally, I think one other feature I like to call out is that I think we often don't talk about it, but basic needs, support services are really critical. And we often discount those, or we don't really think about how those like play into programs, but how they're really critical to help a young person stabilize and access and persist in a program. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. You all know this. I think these are probably features that are common across all of your programs, but I would just say it's an eye that we bring towards our investments and our lens when we're thinking about what can we do and like what should we be building the capacity around or supporting the work of on the ground. So this kind of brings us to the project that we've been working with Mary Ellen and this group of folks that you're going to hear from today around. We've been calling it Core to Career internally, but it really started with connecting to Mary Ellen, learning more about your work and the core network and the affiliates, and then thinking about this growing conversation that's been happening in the last couple of years around there's going to be an emergence of public and private investments is really going to support the growth of new job opportunities in a number of fields, right? Construction, manufacturing, utilities, climate-related, disaster mitigation. Just, we're hearing a lot about it. And we really wanted to learn more about what are these job opportunities, right? Like, where are they? How many of them are there really? What are the characteristics of these jobs? But also, like, what is the potential for us to connect these kinds of jobs to programs such as yours? And really think about supporting the creation of a structured pathway for young adults who are engaged in service into careers. And so that's really where we came to this point in this project, and we convened this group of people together. And I wanted to thank the Core Network, Urban, Brookings, JFF to kind of go on this ride with us. We've been calling it a sprint, but really trying to understand and answer these questions and really understand like how can we assess and scope these opportunities. And I'm really grateful that we're at this place now where we can start sharing some of what we've been learning to date, and I hope you all find it valuable too. So one more thing before I turn over to Mary Ellen. My colleague Sarah and I are here, and she has handouts for like what we're calling the Core to Career project. So we're happy to hang around after this panel session if you have any questions or if you want to grab a handout from us as well. We're around as well. And with that, turn it over.
Thank you, Renita and Sarah. The KC Foundation has been really supportive of this work and challenging us to think about how we do better for you all and for your core members. So our next partner is actually a familiar partner. It is Vanessa Bennett from Jobs for the Future, and she has been at multiple conferences with us and a longtime supporter. Vanessa is with Jobs for the Future, and for more than 40 years, JFF has partnered with organizations like ours to scale best practices, influence policy and action, and invest in innovations. They work to create learner and worker opportunity, strengthen education and career navigation, ensure program quality and efficacy, and integrate learning and work to build strong and regional economies. And JFF and the Core Network have partnered on different projects for years. Our post-secondary education success was in partnership, so we're happy to have an opportunity to work with them again. And Vanessa is a good friend to the Core Network. She is the director with this, of the Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning at JFF. She has over 15 years experience in youth and workforce development. Her work focuses specifically on expanding access to economic mobility for workers and learners through state and federal policy, and the expansion of apprenticeship, work-based learning, and service programs. Before JFF, Vanessa spent 6 years with Youth Build USA, where she led national service programs, developed career pathways for opportunity youth, and provided technical assistance to local programs. So she is absolutely the right person to be working with us in this space. And what JFF has done over the last couple of months, which I'm really excited to hear about, is taken all the surveys that you've filled out, the curriculum that you have shared with us, to develop some learning for us about common threads, about gaps, about best practices, and to help us at the Core Network see where we can help with TA going forward, but also to help us make the case about where cores are already really strong. So Vanessa, we are really excited to hear about what you all have learned, and I know more information is coming, but thank you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here. Great to be back in the room with you all. So as Mary Ellen mentioned, over the last couple of months, Jobs for the Future has been working very closely with Annie E. Casey, the Core Network, Urban, and Brookings to do sort of what we're calling a landscape scan of core curricula, data, surveys, to kind of get an understanding of like what's happening in this workforce development space. How are you talking about it, thinking about it? What are those best practices and innovations? What are the things that are happening consistently, maybe a little bit sporadically across the field, so that we can offer some thoughts and ideas for where this work moves going forward and how the field builds around it going forward. Let me just, is this my clicker?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna attempt to use the clicker. There we go. Okay. So really quickly, I want to give a huge shout out to my team because I most certainly did not do this myself. We are led by my colleague Maria Cabillo, who's the project director. Meredith Hills, who's in the room with us today, is a senior manager and managed most of the data analysis for the surveys that you guys have responded to. Amy Prince is an instructional designer and supported the deep curriculum review and analysis that we did. And then I contributed across these work streams, but really was at the whim of my powerful and wonderful team. So I want to start by just kind of giving us what I'm sure you already know, but I think bears saying, the value of the core experience in this world of workforce training. And Renita said it really well. It's not always just a workforce training program, and I think that is one of the powerful aspects of the core experience. Young people are deeply centered in the work that you all do. Their identities are honored, their experiences are validated and valued, and it's not simply about connecting a young person to a job, it's about helping them build the agency, autonomy, confidence, and knowledge to move beyond that job and access career pathways and longer-term opportunity, and in part become that mentor to their peers and others in the community to help them inevitably do the same. And when we think about workforce training, I think that is one of the biggest missing pieces to our entire system. We don't always center workers and the worker experience, and we don't always honor intentionally and thoughtfully the things that workers are experiencing and going through. So I think that already gives the core network a leg up. You're marrying both training with also helping individuals grow and develop as people. So our approach to doing our landscape analysis had a few kind of key goals and objectives in mind. Again, with the primary overarching goal being to really understand what's happening across all of the great programs you guys run. So what we wanted to do was look at the skills and competencies that are being offered and get a sense of what they are and what's sort of cropping up as the most prevalent ones. We wanted to understand the certifications and credentials that you're offering and how those tie to specific workforce training opportunities or industries or career pathways. We wanted to also understand your connections to apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship and other types of earn and learn models. We wanted to evaluate how cores are documenting their connections to the workforce system at the state level, the national level, through industry partners. And then most importantly, we wanted to be able to uplift those innovative practices that you all are embedding in your programs every day. And part of this, again, is to help kind of continue to raise the field and move the field forward so that the broader workforce system recognizes the important value that you offer, not just as a training program, but in ensuring that young people who are the future of our workforce system are prepared for all of the changing needs that we're going to see in the labor market. So what we did was an analysis and review of survey data provided to the core network. We looked at annual profiles that the core network has done on programs. We also did an assessment of 25 different programs, curricula, and training materials to kind of understand what is happening. There's a couple things that I want to call out. So first, the curriculum and training that were provided to us, it varies quite a bit. And that makes sense because core programs are highly individual. You all are tailoring what you do to the young people you serve, the labor markets you're operating in, and the partners that you're engaging. So as a result, this graph sort of shows the variance of what we got from different programs. That included syllabuses, learning objectives, credential attainment plans and information. It also included course descriptions. And I share this because as we go through some of the key findings, I just want to note and have us all keep in mind that because of the diversity of things that we were provided, that was where our findings came from. So small sample size of the entire field, only 25 programs, and a big diversity of the types of curriculum and training materials that we got. So just keep that in mind as you hear the findings. The findings are not by any means a total summation of what's happening. They're responding to a very specific sample. All right, so the first thing that we found is that there are a lot of amazing workforce practices happening every day at core programs. These are kind of the biggest overarching ones that we wanted to really call out because they're pretty foundational, not only to what the core network and local core programs do, but these are really essential skills for young adults in helping them find those career pathways and be successful within them. 92% of the programs that we reviewed within their curriculum and training materials had a really clear approach and structure to how they provided career preparation and readiness for individuals. And this spanned everything from mock interviews to resume writing courses, to job shadows, to having employers come into the program through volunteer days or co-deliver training to participants. So a real range of activities, but a really clear focus on making sure that young people were getting those opportunities to build their readiness for the world of work and understand how the skills they were building would support them in their long-term career goals. Almost every single program we reviewed, 96%, offered really clear life skills training. So this is your sort of 21st century and employability skills. Things like problem solving, communication, partnership building, community engagement, leadership. Again, very, very core to what the core network does. But of the programs we reviewed, almost every one of them had a strong plan and learning objectives in place so that the participant could sort of self-evaluate and reflect where they were in this skill development and be able to then communicate that back. And then of the programs we reviewed, 24% had a strong emphasis on civic engagement. This includes connections to building relationships in the community, leadership, service projects. And this is again where I want to bring us back to that little asterisk that we only looked at 25 programs and there was a diversity of materials provided. And what I know of the work that you all do is that this number is way, way higher. It's just probably not clearly documented in the curricula that you use or in the materials that you develop to guide learning objectives and training plans. And so I think this is an important one to call out because we know it's happening, it's just not showing up in programmatic materials. The next thing that we really wanted to look at was industry and pathway alignment. And again, given the very diverse way in which cores operate, the things that you all are focused on, there were varying levels of alignment with industry and career pathways. But what we did see is that the vast majority were aligned to multiple pathways. And I think this is really powerful because it demonstrates that you're not just supporting one-off connections to a job, you are thinking critically about how your programming meets the needs of employers and industry across sectors, how the skills that you give to young people and help them build support their access to more than one opportunity, and how they can prepare themselves for mobility up a career pathway or across other sectors. And that's huge because I think the more that we prepare young people for multiple things, the more agency they get in their long-term career journey. And then 3 of the 25 programs that we looked at, about 12%, didn't have a strong alignment to the industries that you see listed here, which were sort of the priority areas for Annie EKC in this work, but they had strong connections to other industries. So what that tells me is that perhaps clean energy, resource management, disaster response and preparedness, maybe the labor market for these programs isn't huge, the job opportunities aren't heavily available, but there are other industries and sectors well-positioned to support young people and well-positioned to offer job and career opportunities. So again, the practices are happening, the innovations are happening, the connections to industry just look a little different. What we also saw was that there was a lot of variation in how programs were engaging with employers and industry. Again, those activities, I think, heavily tailored to the unique needs, the unique landscapes in which programs are operating. So some programs had really robust employer engagement strategies. They had MOUs and memorandums of understanding and agreement and letters of support. Others had strong relationships, but maybe they weren't documented. Or they had really strong relationships with employers, but perhaps not the local workforce board or the state office of apprenticeship or an industry association. So the partnerships are there. It's just sort of the depth of the relationship, the way that it's documented, and how that relationship is being leveraged to support job entry, employment, and career advancement for participants. Some of the key things that we found, 68% of programs have clear plans for how they actively assess and continuously adapt what they're doing so that they're always meeting the needs of the workforce development system. I think this is really important because, as we know, the labor market is constantly changing, and I don't think that's gonna kind of calm down at any point. So having that ability to always be thinking about, is the training I'm offering right now the most relevant thing? Are the credentials I'm providing having the greatest impact? Is really valuable. 60% of programs reported that employers and unions recognize their training and in fact have preferred hiring status. That, I think, is amazing. That clearly demonstrates that what you're doing works. It doesn't just work for young people, it works for industry. Employers see your value. They want to work with you. They want to make that bridge and that connection for young adults. And then 32% of programs had clearly articulated career pathways. And so what this means is that they had some sort of documentation, training, or material that clearly identified the first job post-program and all of the jobs that could potentially come after it. So a participant could go through a career exploration activity or a mentoring activity, and they could visually see where their skills were going to take them and what they might need to continue to build upon one job after the other to continue to advance. And then the other thing that I will flag is there was a lot of interest also expressed from employers in wanting to formalize relationships. Recognition of how cores are operating as pre-apprenticeships, recognition of how cores are continuing to support their individual labor market needs, but also the larger needs of an industry or a sector. Then we looked at certifications and credentials. I know this is a lot of data, but hopefully it's helpful. So what we learned here is that, once again, everything varies. So all core programs are doing things a little bit differently, which again is ensuring that you're meeting specific needs that you have with your employers and your youth. The distribution of credential approaches really demonstrates that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to workforce development, and that even though some consistency in some ways can be helpful, the most important thing is that programs are designed and delivered to meet the unique needs of participants and employers in your community, region, and state. We saw that not all industries had occupations not all industries or occupations necessarily had industry-recognized credentials, and so this certainly did impact some of our findings in terms of the number of credentials that folks were embedding into their programs. 12% of programs had formally industry-recognized credentials clearly outlined. So this means that it's a credential that an industry has validated, has said matters, has said that they recognize, and will ensure that somebody is able to demonstrate their skills if they get employment. We also saw that 60% of programs, they were offering certifications, they were offering credentials that met industry needs, but they might not be recognized. And again, that could be for any number of reasons. Perhaps industry has yet to establish a recognized credential, perhaps the Department of Labor doesn't recognize it, but regardless, that credential does tie to skills that are relevant to that employer in that industry. And then about 24% of programs didn't have industry recognized credentials or certifications. And again, I think this is largely because it wasn't documented in the materials that we got. I feel confident that almost every program is offering some sort of certification. This variance is sort of all about how it shows up in the program materials and lesson plans. And then finally, we looked at connections to earn and learn pathways, so specifically alignment with pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship. And we were really excited to find that 8% of programs are actually registered apprenticeships. They are in the apprenticeship system either as employers of record, RTI providers, in some cases sponsors. So they've made the leap from a training program to a high-quality structured apprenticeship. 28% of programs were designated as pre-apprenticeships, or their training was recognized as a high-quality pre-apprenticeship by employers and industry. And then 20% of programs offered what we referred to as non-registered apprenticeship experiences. They have all the hallmarks of a high-quality registered apprenticeship, but they haven't gone through that formal approval process. And I think that what this kind of highlights here is that there's a lot of opportunity to leverage apprenticeship as a training module, as a way to connect young people to more job opportunities, and certainly functioning as a pre-apprenticeship opens up doors to other trainings with unions and non-union employers. And I'll make a quick plug for the session the U.S. Forest Service did this morning on their expanding registered apprenticeship pathways. So again, another good reason to think about how you fit into the world of earn and learn. All right, let's talk about some bright spots and opportunities. So there are a lot of amazing things that are happening across the core network. We all know this. There's strong alignment with multiple pathways, deep intentionality around skills training and combining both real life experiences that contextualize skills with technical skills, with employability skills. Employers and industry recognize the value. They want to work with the core network at a national level and a local level. They see the value that you bring to young people. They see how you can be a talent pipeline for them. And there's a real intentionality in making sure that programs are holistic, not just training programs, not just youth development programs, and not connecting to one-off jobs, but meaningfully thinking about participants as a whole and meaningfully ensuring that they understand the full career landscape that they have access to. There's a deep learner-centered focus, one that allows for flexible learning, one that allows for peer mentoring, social capital building, and an ability to develop a sense of oneself in the world of work, which is incredibly important as we think about not just entering the labor market, but succeeding long-term within it. And the wraparound services, the supports, the structures that we know are essential in keeping young people in a program are a strong pillar across all of the programs that we looked at. There is very intentional effort to make sure that all young people are able to succeed and thrive in a program and have what they need to make the right decisions for them moving forward. And so all of these bright spots, they demonstrate an understanding of people and workers, an understanding of how to make the labor market accessible for them, an understanding of how to engage employers in recruiting young people and supporting young people, and in building a sense of community that bridges your work with that of labor. And not a lot of workforce training programs do that. So some opportunities as we move this work forward. One thing we found is that in the documents we reviewed, learning objectives were not always clear. So just continuing to refine and define how somebody self-evaluates their success. This will help young people be able to say to themselves, here's where I'm succeeding, here's where I need help. And again, it will give them a better sense of self and the vocabulary that they might need for the workforce. Continuing to expand those workforce partnerships from local employers all the way up to state system partners. Continuing to integrate credentials, specifically formalized credentials when it's possible, and this is where workforce partners and state systems partners will be incredibly valuable. Deepening career pathways work, working with folks like Brookings and Urban and JFF and the Core Network and Annie E. Casey to build out those career pathways, to be able to visually map out the first job to the last job. And then continuing peer learning opportunities like this. There's so much knowledge and innovation across the network, so much opportunity to learn from each other. And I think the more that we create space for that knowledge sharing, because you all are the experts, the more there's an opportunity to continuously raise the field. I will stop there.
All right. Thank you. So Vanessa is going to be doing a workshop this afternoon if you want to learn some more about what they learned from the curriculum review. I think this is an incredible opportunity to identify some places where the Core Network can step in and provide some support in TA. Obviously, you all, a lot of you are, it's everything you can do just to sort of, keep your crews safe and moving forward, and adding additional layers of workforce development and career pathways and employer partnerships takes extra capacity that you may not have. So I think this is an opportunity for us at the national level to see where we can really bring some extra support to what you are doing and help you maybe fill in some gaps. So excited to dig into that a little bit more. Also, I think that enables us to make a case to funders, saying we know that this is an area where cores really need some more capacity, or cores are doing a great job here, but they need to. So I think this work really sets the groundwork for a lot of progress moving forward, and I thank you so much for working with us on this. So the Brookings Institution has also been a great partner in this work. Their mission is to conduct in-depth, nonpartisan research to improve policy and governance at local, national, and global levels. They have been at the forefront of public economic policy for more than a century. Brookings research includes in-depth analysis of infrastructure and conservation jobs, as well as an opportunity youth and alternative career paths. And their role has really been to look at where the bipartisan infrastructure dollars and the Inflation Reduction Act dollars are landing in communities and states, and what types of jobs are being created as a result, and how those align with what you all are doing with your core members, and how we can make some of those connections. So Martha Ross is going to join us from the Brookings Institution. She researches and writes about workers and the labor market with a focus on creating a healthy economy that offers opportunity for all. In previous work, she has profiled low-wage workers and examined the employment experiences and pathways among young people. Prior to Brookings, Martha was a Presidential Management Fellow at the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation at the Department of Health and Human Services, where she focused on welfare policy. So please join me in welcoming Martha to talk about what their work has told us about where we can take our collective work.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, and I want to thank Renita and Casey and Allison Gerber at Casey for giving me a chance to work with some of my favorite people and to meet new people who are my favorite people to work with. I am at Brookings Metro. Metro is one of the 5 programs within Brookings. We believe that every community can be just, sustainable, and prosperous, no matter its starting point. We're the part of Brookings that focuses the most on state and local government. My role has long been to focus on workforce development and labor market analysis. And I teamed up on this project with my colleague Joe Kane, who is also here, so please wave. He has long focused on infrastructure as a field, with also a strong focus on the infrastructure workforce. And let me tell you that as a workforce person, it has been wonderful to have a colleague who knows the infrastructure field in this past couple years when there's all this talk about infrastructure money and what is infrastructure. He and I have seen a lot of potential for infrastructure-related career pathways in service and conservation corps. We wrote a short piece about it a couple years ago. We co-hosted a webinar with Service Year Alliance focused on energy careers, and we highlighted some folks in Minnesota. And so it's been wonderful to get to work on this. So the first thing that I want to lay out for you is to define infrastructure. The pictures here give you a sense. It's not complete, but what it shows is a water treatment plant, it shows a rain garden, it shows electrical meters, and then a streetscape with curb cuts and street lights and pedestrians and probably places for bikes as well. And maybe there was an urban tree canopy program that worked on the trees there. Maybe there's a retrofitting program in one of the buildings there. So infrastructure, it's sort of all around us. It makes our day-to-day lives possible in some ways that are quite obvious and in some ways that are less so. So the value of a water treatment plant is very, very obvious. But so is but there's so much green infrastructure that is not as obvious, that we're slowly getting smarter about focusing on stormwater and how it can pollute waterways and cause erosion. So that's also an important part of infrastructure. More generally, sort of a wonky definition of it is that it's a series of natural and human-made physical assets that provide basic public services: water, electricity, the ability to move from one place to the other, and so on. And Joe Kane, my colleague, has identified a list of 7 subsectors that are within the infrastructure field. So there's transportation, think roads and bridges, transportation within a place, transportation between places, airports, heavy rail. There's trade and logistics, so like freight rail, air cargo, trucking, warehouses. Like, say you want to buy something at Target, chances are it came in from a container ship at a port and then got trucked, went through some multimodal facility and then got trucked to your place. Energy, generating, transmitting, distributing energy, telecommunications, broadband and transmissions. So if you wanted to order that thing from Target online, after you plug in your computer to get the energy, then you have your broadband or dial-up or whatever so that you can order your whatever. Water, clean drinking water, managing stormwater, managing floods, and then public works like streetscapes, land redevelopment and such. So these systems some of them are humongous and expensive and last a really long time. Like think of an airport or a train station. But not always. Think of a wetland that needs to be restored and its role in habitat restoration and preventing flooding. And in general, they often have some kind of tie to the private sector because of the fact that they're providing. Sorry, did I say private or public? Okay, I meant to say public. So they usually have a tie to the public sector because they're providing public goods, but there's also a strong private sector involvement in terms, like think about toll roads and all kinds of stuff. So hopefully you can see an overlap in there between what you all do and infrastructure writ large. Then the question is, how do you define core occupations that fit into this infrastructure landscape? And luckily we had a head start. We built on some previous work that Joe did that profiled the infrastructure workforce. He identified 16.6 million workers, 95 occupations, almost 12% of all workers. A lot of them are in the skilled trades, not all of them. There's also architects, civil engineers, there's a lot of construction-related jobs, heavy equipment operators, pile drivers, bulldozers. There's a lot in transportation, truck drivers, both the semis and the delivery trucks, and a lot of warehouse workers. Think about those logistics jobs. But then we thought, that's a good start, but it's not a great fit for, some of those jobs aren't a great fit for Service Conservation Corps. And it's probably missing some really important occupations that Service and Conservation Corps care about. So we did a process where we checked in with our partners, our project partners, and we read a lot of reports. And one of the things we did pretty closely was look at the annual profile that you all fill out for the TCN, and we looked at what some of the focus areas are that you all say are your priorities. So we looked at coastal restoration and disaster response, solar installation, stormwater management, wildfire mitigation and response, recycling, landscaping. We looked at how you measure your impact, how many housing units are rehabbed or retrofitted, how many community gardens did you build or maintain, how many meals were prepped and distributed, how much wildfire mitigation did you do, and on and on. And then in terms of the reports that we looked at, we looked at reports that talked with a particular level of specificity about the kinds of jobs that are associated with different either infrastructure projects or, quote, green infrastructure or climate-related projects. And we ran into some difficulty there, not insurmountable, but you guys can tell me more about this probably, but there's no consensus definition of what a green job is or what a climate-related job is. There's a lot of widespread agreement about major themes and examples. Everyone's favorite is solar installers, and I think that also is really annoying to a lot of people. But there is agreement that a lot of quote-unquote green jobs are not actually new, distinct occupations. They're existing occupations that now are incorporating new skills or activities to promote, reduce greenhouse gas emissions or climate mitigation and adaptation. Unfortunately, for our purposes, we needed a pretty technical definition of an occupation, because in order to count occupations the way Joe did for infrastructure workers, the way we wanted to do for core occupations, is you have to use the big public data sets that the Department of Labor maintains, and they have identified like 800 plus occupations. And when you narrow in on a specific occupation, you can be like, all right, let's look at the wages, let's look at the demographics of the people who are in that job. You can just learn a lot. But like right now, it is literally not possible to say count the number of climate adaptation or resilience jobs there are, because we don't know there's no occupation classification for them. These occupations are updated, I think, like every 10 years or so, and in one of the next rounds it's going to get brought up, I'm sure. And there will probably be a chance for you all to weigh in on how to define that occupation. So in the end, what we did was we added a bunch, we subtracted a bunch. We were like, they're not really into truck driving, they're not really into warehouse workers or multimodal freight facility places. So we ran this by our partners, and then we made a bunch of judgment calls. And what we found when we did all that and crunched the numbers was we had a new list, a bit smaller than the infrastructure workforce, 81 occupations, almost 13 million workers. And with a median hourly wage for core workers of almost $30 an hour, which is higher than the median wage for all occupations. And one of Joe's points from the infrastructure workforce that he's done is that infrastructure occupations offer a better chance at higher wages for people without a 4-year college degree, which is pretty important. So that's one of the things we also want to keep in mind with core-related occupations. Core occupations skew older, as do infrastructure occupations generally. So what I wanted to do next is show you some of the occupations that have high levels of young workers, which we defined as those under age 24 and under. So the age group that you're seeing. Because the group of core occupations that we profiled includes all levels of seniority and skills. I'll get to that in a second, but it's not only the entry-level positions. Here we wanted to show you what some of those entry-level positions are. And hopefully some of these look familiar to you, even if they're in like technical SOC code, Department of Labor terminology that you would not use. The construction laborers is one of the biggest occupations overall, as are landscapers. Then there's a pretty good chunk of helpers in specifically pipe layers and plumbers and electricians, and it would be interesting to see how that relates to apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeships. And then here is a spotlight of about the 40 of the 81 occupations. And the bigger ones are the ones that have the most, and same with the orange ones. So as you'll see, there's occupations here along the pay scale, along the educational attainment scale, along the seniority scale. So there's plenty of room to develop career pathways. 81 occupations is also kind of unwieldy to talk about. And we wanted to figure out a better way to communicate about it and to provide a framework for folks like you in which this could be actionable. So we thought about how to group them in ways that make sense to your work. So we created 5 career clusters, one focused on buildings, so construction, maintenance, upgrades of buildings, whether they're residential, commercial, or industrial, energy generating, transmission, distribution, water. It includes both water treatment and stormwater management and a lot of what you would call green infrastructure, land and forest management, which is not only things in actual forests, but a lot of things in more settled areas like related to parks and trails and such. And then hazardous materials, environmental remediation, and disaster response. And most jobs are not confined to only one cluster. So they're not mutually exclusive. We just realized pretty quickly that it would be both hard and not worth it and silly to try to make sure that one occupation fit only into one cluster. So as you can see, the construction laborers cross all 5. The firefighters are in land and forest management and disaster response. Operating engineers, the folks who operate all those big, heavy construction equipment, they're in 4 out of the 5, and so on. And like the infrastructure workforce overall, core occupations are heavily male-dominated. In fact, core occupations are more male-dominated than infrastructure occupations are, which is my guess. I haven't talked about it with Joe yet, but my guess is probably because we took out some occupations that women might be more likely to be in, like some bus drivers or warehouse workers. So there's a lot of room for diversifying the pipeline here. And we also took a look at where these occupations exist. They're all over the country. This is a map of the nation's 100 largest metropolitan areas. You can see, by the size of it, that there are, not surprisingly, there's larger numbers in larger metros like New York City and LA and Chicago. But what the colors show is that some areas have, in some areas, core occupations make up a higher share of that local workforce than others. So in the darker circles, you can see core occupations are more prominent there, and that tends to be the case in some smaller areas. So what does this all mean? How can this be useful to you? And more specifically, thinking of you broadly, we're thinking individual programs, actors at the state level, say service commissioners, or climate core programs that are run out of that level, and at the federal and national level. How can we use this to shape and inform what you're doing? If you are doing workforce development, it's hard. It's much better to do that with some of the basic labor market analysis about the kinds of occupations that you want to target, and whether those occupations are growing or declining. And so we're hoping that this kind of information can be useful to you going forward. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Martha. Okay. All right. I'm being told we need to move, so I will be quickly. Last but certainly not least is Shane Spalding from the Urban Institute. And the Urban Institute is a research to impact institution founded on one simple idea: to improve lives and strengthen communities. And we need practices and policies that work. The Urban Institute has previously published research on expanding equitable access to green jobs, a framework for collaborative action, and summarizing approaches for designing inclusive apprenticeship programs. Shane is a senior fellow with Work, Education, and Labor Division. The Urban Institute, her work focuses on workforce development, post-secondary education, and employment. Her research has examined performance, measurement, and employer engagement in workforce programs and strategies for supporting workers in alternative work arrangements. And before joining Urban, Shane was the University Director of Workforce Development for City University of New York, and the nation's largest public urban university. And their role has been to explore existing core programming and workforce development through in-depth case studies and workforce programming at cores, and how that will help inform best practices and potential for growth. So please join me in welcoming Shane.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be with you all here today. And I know we're trying to move this along, which is good because I don't have as much to say as the fabulous people who preceded me. I just want to say that it has been such a pleasure to engage with this group of people in this work, especially at this very difficult moment in time. Just the opportunity to collaborate has been amazing, so thank you so much. So what I'm going to talk about is work that's kind of upcoming, so that's why I can be a little briefer. We don't have results to share, we have ideas to share, and we also want to get your input on some of those ideas. So as Mary Ellen said, our role in this project, well, first let me just say a bit about Urban. I know she introduced us, but our mission is to drive impact by equipping change makers with evidence and solutions. So we're a research organization, and we envision a future where every person and every community have the opportunity and power to thrive. So our role in this project is going to be, has several different dimensions. But one of the things that we're going to be doing is helping to develop case studies of a select number of cores across the country. And the idea here really is to help explore, develop and explore the opportunity that exists here at the intersection of the work that you all do as cores and the opportunities in emerging jobs related to infrastructure. And so we're going to be doing, so we say site visits, but they're really phone interviews, virtual interviews with a set of cores around the country. And the idea is to really understand and illustrate all the great work that you do related to workforce development, as Vanessa described today, but also to identify areas of opportunities. How can we create stronger connections to these infrastructure jobs? How do we create stronger connections in communities to the partnerships that kind of make all this work happen, that make career pathways work happen? So it'll be an opportunity to lift up your great work, but also to see how we can push it further. We are going to be, over the coming weeks, looking to select sites for those site visits, and we're going to be conducting interviews, and it'll not only be with core staff, but also with partners and employers and youth, just to really understand sort of how the opportunities that exist to build this work further on the ground. And we hope that the result of this will be, I don't know if any of you have seen Urban's publications, but it'll be a beautiful publication on our website that you can share around that will speak to policymakers at the state level, local level, that will speak to foundations and philanthropy. They can see the opportunity here, and then also might have some ideas for how you can further develop your programs. So I'm not going to go in detail on all of this, and a lot of this Vanessa actually covered. But what I'm going to just highlight today is some of the questions that we're going to be asking as part of our site visits. And these questions come from decades of research on what is effective when delivering workforce development programs and also when serving young people. So you'll see here, and my colleague Nathan Stick is collaborating on this work. Raise your hand, Nathan. And also collaborated on this visual, which was for a prior project, that really looked at what are the key dimensions of a workforce-aligned program. And so I'm just going to briefly talk through these today, and they align with some of the questions we'll have in our site visits. So the first one, there are two foundational ones. The one on the left is the desire to make sure programs are youth-centered, and Vanessa talked a lot about this. And you all know how to do that, but we'll talk a little bit more about it. Then there's market-aligned. You'll see that line across the bottom. And then three other components: supporting career decisions and navigation, building skills for work, and connecting to employment. So we know there are a variety of ways that programs can be youth-centered. It's by taking a developmental approach, considering the diversity of youth and their needs, supporting youth voice. And I put on here focusing on career pathways. We know for many youth, this might be their first job. And so trying to think about the longer-term career pathway is really important. So a question that's coming out for us and that will help to frame our site visits here is, how can CORES support youth to access first jobs that provide pathways to jobs in infrastructure specifically? So the next one is about market alignment, and Vanessa again talked a lot about this, and so did Martha. But we know that it's important to identify which jobs are growing and in demand, to understand the characteristics of those jobs, their qualifications and dimensions of job quality, and then working with employers to design training programs and align credentials with industry requirements. So the question that comes from this is really, how can CORES effectively build relationships with employers and engage in industry partnerships related to the infrastructure sector specifically? The third dimension here is supporting career decisions and navigation. So of course we know about the importance of having caring adults, which Renita mentioned earlier, but this early consistent advising and mentorship, which seems to be a large part of core programming, offering career assessment, exploration and planning, and then providing access to supportive services. So the research points to all of this being very important. So some of the questions that we'll ask about through this work are, what are the opportunities to expand career navigation to realize employment goals, and how can CORES work with community partners to further support participants? The fourth dimension is looking at building skills for work. We know about the importance of contextualized learning, so that can be learning at a work site, talking to industry representatives. We know about the importance of having industry demand skills and credentials, and applied and work-based learning, especially a pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship, which it seems like is increasingly common in core programs. So the questions that we'll be exploring here is, how can employers be engaged to strengthen contextualized learning, review curricula, and validate credentials? And then also, how can work-based learning be expanded to include connections to pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeships, which you know are really common in infrastructure jobs? And the last piece here is looking at connecting youth to employment. So, I've been in the workforce field for my entire career, and for so long it was like, oh, okay, you're at the end of the program, now we're going to talk about getting a job, but we know that that happens from the very beginning, right? But supporting that transition is so key, how to communicate with employers, and then also the importance of expanding personal networks. We know how important those personal connections can be. So through our work, we'll be looking at how programs can support retention and program success by staying in contact with alumni and employers, and then what other partnerships, including community colleges, industry partnerships, and unions, are important for supporting employment goals. Um, oh, I did not advance the slide, but you got the gist. To summarize, we're hoping that these case studies will help to build knowledge in 3 areas. So we really want to build knowledge around how to connect opportunity youth to quality infrastructure jobs and pathways, how to connect core programs to local workforce systems, and what supports are needed to develop workforce-aligned strategies. We know a lot of this is already underway, but it's like the questions here are like how to take it further. What can the core network do to help support that, but also how can others within the field support your efforts? So I had this last piece, and it's a great transition. I don't know how much time we'll have for a panel, but we want to know from you, like, what kind of questions would you like us to ask in our case studies? So if you have ideas, feel free to come up to me after the session, because we would love to hear from you. What would be valuable for you to hear? If you were to see a case study on another core program, what would you want to know? And so I'd love to hear from you if we don't get to it in the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Okay, I guess we're about out of time, but if I could just summarize, in case you haven't noticed, we have really some of the smartest, most experienced people in their fields helping us with this project, both to see where we are as a field, where we could use some help, where we have best practices, and how we take that message to funders and partners going forward. I think that even in this administration, pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship is going to be really important, and we're going to have some opportunities as a field to make our case. And I'm just really excited. We just heard a ton of information, so if you're absorbing it all, that's okay. We're going to spend some more time digging in on this, and we're going to take some additional steps. So where are we going to go next? For those of you who shared curriculum, we are hoping to have opportunities to both make some large statements about how great cores are doing in this space, but also identify some areas where the core network and partners and funders can help. Also, if you submitted curriculum, we're hoping to be able to work with you to give you some feedback on these are the really great areas, here's how it kind of aligns with best practices, and what can we do to help you fill in some gaps. Our intention is to really be able to help you refine the great work that you're already doing, and fill in some gaps where you're having a little bit of capacity. We're also going to be able to have some publications and some outcomes to share with the world at large from this project, which I'm really excited about. And again, I think that will help us make the case with funders and with partners. But I am just really excited about this. I appreciate your help so much. I'm sorry we don't have time for questions, but I do think you're going to be here for a little bit if you have a few minutes after the panel. And we're going to continue to have dialogue about this, maybe webinars. A next step, as Shane pointed out, is to identify some cores for virtual site visits, so we can really help you understand, or we can understand really what you're doing, where your strengths and your challenges are, and how we can be helpful. And I think another step beyond that would be for a pilot program with some career pathways and employers, and hopefully some investment that we can bring to the table. I would dream of bringing sort of really a massive investment to this work. So wherever you are sort of in your journey on being a workforce development program, whether you just need a few tweaks and a little bit of capacity, or whether you really are just kind of starting it, that we can help you, because this is just so important what you're doing, and not only for the young people but for your communities and for the nation at large. So huge round of thanks for our panel.